It was late March when I decided to head out to the mountains. The world had been in a constant state of chaos since the pandemic began. I was working from home, isolated, and felt the weight of being cooped up all day. But I was used to traveling, to escaping, so I decided to use the situation as an excuse to get away from everything. I needed a break from the constant pressure, the stress from work, the long silences that had started feeling too loud. I drove up to a secluded forest area I had been to once before, somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. It was still chilly up there, but the cold didn't bother me much. I had a cabin rented for the weekend, a small, rustic thing in the middle of nowhere. It was the kind of place where cell service didn't reach, and the only sounds you could hear were the rustling of trees and the occasional animal in the distance. I arrived, unloaded my gear, and started to set up my place for the night. The cabin was isolated, no neighbors for miles. It was the perfect kind of place if you wanted to get lost in your thoughts, which was exactly what I was hoping for. I built a fire, cooked some simple food, and spent the evening reading a book by the firelight. The night was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the world outside. By the time I finished my book, it was well past midnight. The fire had burned down to just embers, and the cabin was filled with a deep, quiet darkness. The kind of quiet that was almost too quiet, like something was missing. The kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound around you. I sat there for a moment, just listening to the wind outside, the occasional creak of the old cabin settling, and then I heard it. Footsteps outside the cabin. At first I thought it was just the wind, or maybe an animal moving around. But then the footsteps grew louder, closer. It sounded like someone walking in the snow, heavy boots crunching the frost beneath them. I froze, my heart pounding. The thought ran through my mind. Was someone else here? Was it another hiker or camper? I hadn't seen anyone else when I arrived, and the closest town was over an hour away. The footsteps stopped just outside the cabin. I couldn't see anyone, and the light from the fire barely flickered through the windows. I grabbed my phone instinctively, but I already knew there was no signal. The silence was suffocating, and the cold air seemed to seep into the cabin, despite the warmth of the fire. I got up, cautiously peeking through the cabin's small window, but saw nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone, just the moonlight illuminating the trees around me. I stood there for a while, debating whether or not I should go outside and check. But the thought of opening the door into that dark, cold night made my stomach churn. I decided to wait. I'd stay inside and let whatever it was pass. But then, just as I was about to sit back down, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it might be a wrong number or spam, but as I looked at the message, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Nice night for a hike, isn't it? I blinked at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. Who could possibly be texting me? I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. The message was short and simple, but it felt strangely familiar, like whoever sent it knew something about me. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the phone. I didn't want to reply, but the curiosity was gnawing at me. I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came almost immediately. "Just someone enjoying the quiet out here, like you." I stared at the screen for a moment, the words sinking in. It didn't make sense. There was no one here. I hadn't seen another soul on the drive up, and the cabin was isolated. No one should be out here. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone knew I was staying there and was messing with me. But then, as I was about to turn off the phone, another message came through. "You shouldn't be alone out here." I stared at the screen, the words burning into my mind. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I set the phone down on the table, heart racing, and looked around the cabin once more. The wind howled outside, and the trees creaked and swayed, but there was still no sign of anyone. I tried to calm myself down, reminding myself that I was just being paranoid. But then the door handle rattled. I froze, my breath catching in my chest. The handle turned slowly, and I heard a faint scraping sound, like someone was trying to force the door open. I grabbed my coat and pulled my jacket tight around me, but I didn't move. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I felt my phone buzz again, but I ignored it. The rattling of the door continued for a moment, then stopped. I waited, my heart beating so loudly I thought it might explode. The silence that followed was thick, but it wasn't the comforting kind. It was the kind of silence that fills you with dread. And then, just as I was starting to believe the worst was over, I heard something else. A soft tap on the window. I stood still, not daring to move or make a sound. I couldn't look out the window again. I couldn't bring myself to face whatever was out there. The tapping continued, soft and rhythmic, like a pattern, almost like someone was trying to get my attention. But who? I grabbed my phone, feeling a cold sweat form on my brow, and opened the message. Another text. "You're not alone out there." I quickly typed back, my hands shaking. "Who are you? What do you want?" The reply was almost immediate. "I'm just here to make sure you're safe." The message didn't sit right with me. Something about it was off. The way the person spoke, calm, too calm, almost too understanding. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to figure out what was going on, when the tapping on the window grew louder. It wasn't just one tap anymore. It was rapid, aggressive, almost frantic. The glass began to rattle in its frame. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and slowly approached the window. My breath fogged up the glass as I leaned forward, shining the light into the darkness outside. My heart stopped. There was nothing out there. Nothing at all. No shadow, no figure, just the empty, dark forest. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My hands were trembling. I turned away from the window, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. I started pacing around the cabin, my heart still hammering in my chest. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, the message had a picture attached. I opened it slowly, and there it was. A picture of the cabin taken from the woods, taken from a distance, with the cabin lit up from the inside, the shadows of my movement visible through the window. I snapped the phone shut, panic rising in my throat. Someone was out there. Someone had been watching me the entire time. I grabbed my jacket, my shoes, and ran to the door, slamming it open, the cold night air biting at my skin. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breath, ragged and fast, the pounding of my heart, the distant howling of wind, and then I heard it, a soft whisper in the air. "You shouldn't have left the cabin." I didn't look back, I ran.